Thank you for staying with us. It's time for our Sunday Live interview this evening. And with me in studio, as I mentioned earlier, to the far end, on my right, is Dr. Nelson Makanda. He's the Deputy General Secretary of the NCCK. Next to him is James Mamboleo, an advocate. And to my left is Haman Manyora. And you're all welcome to the program. Let's start by listening to Musalia Mudavadi, the ANC party leader and NASA co-principal, and what he had to say today about the postponement of Raila Odinga's swearing in.
The NASA leadership wishes to advise the NASA fraternity and the general public that the swearing in of Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga and His Excellency Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka as President and Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya and the launch of the People's Assembly scheduled for Tuesday, 12th December, have been postponed to a later date.
Dr. Makanda, what do you think of it, and is it good for the country?
I do think that this is a good thing for us as a country. I presume that NASA there is being reasonable. They seem to be giving room for dialogue because if were they to proceed, then they will be cutting off the opportunities that were available for NASA and Jubilee to come together and discuss. So I think this gives us hope, and as among those who are engaged in urging them to come together and speak, I think we are very happy with the decision that has been taken.
All right.
Yeah.
James, NASA say they're doing this to allow for more internal consultations. What is at stake for them?
I'm sure wisdom is finally prevailing, and they know very well that sections of the NASA fraternity don't agree with the purported swearing in of Raila Odinga as president. In fact, from that clip you could see that Mudavadi is saying that they were going to swear Raila Odinga as president and Kalonzo Musyoka as deputy president. Now, those who are in opposition in NASA, of course, have read the Constitution, and they know that it is not possible to swear in any other person as president for as long as there continues to exist a president who's been sworn in accordance with the Constitution and the law. And so I think it's a good thing.
What was at stake?
Probably it is not all thought out very well, and they want probably to build consensus on the issue in NASA itself. There is of course, it's an open secret now that some of the key players in NASA don't agree with that. They think that swearing in or trying to swear in Raila Odinga is going to reduce the standing of the NASA coalition in the eyes of a lot of Kenyans and the international community. And so they probably want to think through this process properly before they lead the country in that direction.
Haman, is that your own understanding of the situation? Our own report has referred to NASA insiders who say that there was this rift among the coalition's top leadership as to how to approach this, as he's just mentioned the question of the international community. And in particular, let's bring in the name of Kalonzo Musyoka, who was to be sworn in as well as deputy president. Do you think this has everything to do with the fact that Kalonzo is not comfortable with what's happening in NASA?
Certainly, a decision of this magnitude, such a momentous decision, will definitely invite some differences of opinion, and therefore I will not be surprised if some sections of the NASA leadership may be uncomfortable with it. What, however, might make me think again about it is that why this late? Because I think if we are talking about leaders and not the general public, the general membership, we are expecting a leader of the caliber that can make decisions in NASA to be a person who would have seen this and not waited until the last moment. So I see this as less of division within NASA. I think either it is, there could be two reasons. Either it is strategic, or it could be that they are beginning to look at whether perhaps this may be a wrong thing to do, and maybe giving, like he's saying, maybe giving dialogue a chance. And also remember, there's a lot of pressure being brought to bear on these fellows from the international community, America, and some of these European governments, from serious people in this country, Francis Atwoli, the church like him, and the rest of, and many people, even small people like us. We've been we've been among those who think something of this magnitude can destroy this country, and therefore maybe there's need to look at it again. So perhaps it is because of this pressure from different quarters that they are taking a rethink, but perhaps it's just tactical.
When you talk about them possibly considering that it might not be the right decision for them, let's start by talking about the decision and what its outcome would have been, or at least what they would have wanted out of it. Obviously, at the end of the day, this is a game for power and for the control of the country, and removing the if you like, the morality question of who's advocating for what cause. At the end of the day, it was about power. Would this route, because all they have said is that they've postponed it, not that it has been cancelled entirely, would this route offer them a viable path to power? And to power in the real sense, that you need to control the instruments of power, not just say, that you have assumed office.
An Article 1 of the Constitution is the place where NASA keeps running to for purposes of propagating the narrative that will lead them to the swearing in of Raila Odinga as president and probably Kalonzo Musyoka as deputy president. And they keep citing this section of Article 1, which says that the people of Kenya can actually exercise the power vested in the Constitution indirectly. However, if you look at Article 3 of the same Constitution, Article 3 does not allow any other person to establish a government other than a government that has been established in pursuance of the provisions of that Constitution. And it actually states at sub-article 2 of that article that any person who tries to establish a government other than by that Constitution is conducting something that would amount to unlawfulness. And so what I think is, for me, what the NASA fraternity are doing is basically managing the expectations of their supporters. They have led them up the garden path for so long, and they have reached that point where they really don't have a very clear path going forward. So they have to keep giving them, throwing certain gems at them to keep the support going, or the support base going. So I think basically, as my friend Professor Hammond says, this is just a question of tact, but not tact in regards to the substance of the matter at hand, but in terms of how do you continue to keep your supporters with you, even when you know ultimately that the course you're pursuing is not going to happen. Because as you said, the real question about politicians and being sworn into office is to wield power. Raila Odinga and NASA cannot wield power in the strict sense of the word under the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, outside of the established procedure of wielding government, which in this particular case is actually being led by Uhuru Kenyatta. So I think for me it is just what you call kicking the can down the road, just hoping that one of these fine days they might have something better to tell their supporters.
Is this an exit strategy?
And somebody has said Kenyans, and I think it's a general problem, not just Kenyan, suffering from selective amnesia. You know, even during the colonial time, there was law established, but people agitated for independence, and they got it. Along the way up to where we are, we've had issues we have dealt with, and we have dealt with these issues outside the law. Now, there are many people who don't seem to understand NASA's thinking. NASA has come to the conclusion, and by NASA I mean Raila, that you cannot get power in this country through civil means, which is elections. Democratically, you present yourself and you get elected. They have come to the conclusion you can never get. So they are pursuing other alternatives. This is not the first time that is happening in this country. It has happened. That's how we got multipartyism. That's how we got a new constitution, and that's how we have got a host of other things. If you want to understand the Kenyan problem today, that is what you need to focus on. Now, how do they want to achieve it? by making life uncomfortable for President Uhuru Kenyatta and his government. They did that with Moi and it worked. They want to make his life so uncomfortable that they will force him to some discussion. And then, because it has worked in other countries, so if you want to understand the problem, this is how you look at it, that they have come to the conclusion you cannot get power in this country through the means we have thought you could use to get. Now people are beginning to say, okay, let's look at some alternative, and this alternative would range from the things we are talking about. So, so that even that swearing in, I am convinced that they also know you cannot get sworn in some corner of this country and then get to State House, unless you have enlisted perhaps the military, which will be tragic. So they know that. It is just part of what I'm saying, to make the government uncomfortable. And in the process, you know, somebody can do something for nuisance value. In the process, the government can make a fool of itself. You get it? Like when they say they are holding a small rally somewhere and the government moves in with full brutal force, and then we have ensuing death. You see, in the eyes of the international community, which you might need, and I think you will need it if you are going to ascend to power, whichever way you are using, you need international support. So if the government then falls for NASA's trick, and there are many tricks, and then you move in with force, and then you kill people, you tear gas, and so on and so forth. So at some point then, something will give way. And that is how they are looking at it.
Will this decision serve to further disenfranchise the NASA base, and then not just them but the country at large, which has almost been held ransom, you know, on bated breath, waiting to see what's going to happen on the 12th, and then now this announcement? Will it disillusion first NASA supporters and the rest of the country?
I suspect that this decision, one, of course, NASA has a massive following in this country. And so they have high expectations of their leaders. And so I hope that the leaders have already evaluated and they know the feelings that will come up amongst their leaders. But it would be nice to take it that this decision will give Jubilee and the government opportunity to demonstrate to Kenyans that they are willing to serve the nation. Because really at stake here, the last elections seemed to have been referendum on elections as a tenable means of a change in leadership in this country and redistribution of leadership in this country. And as it is now, we have a section of the country that is feeling that elections are not a tenable channel for doing that. And so it would be nice for Jubilee to see not that this is a win for them, but to see that NASA is retreating and providing an opportunity for Jubilee really to extend a hand of fellowship, to say really this country is ours. We can fit in Kenya. We can resolve our issues without having to pursue means that are not constitutional, without having to pursue means that people have pursued in the past. Because when we went through the process that went through in 80s and 90s and to bring change, one will say yes, they yielded results, but at what cost? And I hope that Jubilee is not preparing Kenyans to pay that type of a cost, so that then they are pushed to the wall, Kenyans are pushed to the wall, and we come to that point whereby we are taken to a place that we will have avoided. And so I pray that this is an opportunity for Jubilee to see that we can actually extend our hand of fellowship and just say Kenya is ours. All of us can fit in this country. We can be able to deal with our issues as Kenyans, discuss, call Honorable Raila, call their opponents, and begin to ask those critical questions. It can take a week, it can take a day, it can take a month, but let them demonstrate to Kenya that really they are seeking to resolve the issues that are at hand, because they are issues.
Right, and yes, I want to return to how to view this from the Jubilee side very shortly, but if you could just finish dispensing with NASA and let's start with the position that Raila Odinga finds himself in. This is a man with huge following locally, respect internationally, And prior to this election, his fraternity talked about a last bullet, and that this election was so high stakes because of that. Given the pressure that the international community has placed on him, and there is the feeling that the supporters of NASA, some would go as far as saying, particularly the supporters of ODM, are willing to go for broke on this one. They are willing to follow their leader to whatever end the leader says. How does he balance the image and the reputation that he has built over years, literally through blood, sweat and tears, vis-a-vis the expectations of his supporters who may want more, that may go against his local and international brand as a Democrat, and more?
That must be a dilemma really for him, balancing between what actually ought to be right and sensible and statesmanly, and going by the politics of the day, by emotions. Politics about emotions. But as a man who has seen it all, he needs to pause and perhaps think about and think through certain things. So this balance is tricky. But I choose to address myself on one aspect, so that the rest can talk about others. We've gotten to a point in this country, Anne, where the leader, Raila, and his followers may soon be parted. And that is going to be dangerous for this country. If you realize, if you see the way the people are pushing Raila into this swearing in, if you see the kind of anger in this country, in some part of this country, I get the chilling feeling that at some point the people may refuse to go the Raila way, which this is really represented by Miguna's thinking, some form of cowardice, and that you cannot get leadership if every time they are pushing you to get it, you pull back by so-called being rational and thinking. Now the danger I'm talking about is if you have mobs of people that are not answerable to anybody, they will spell doom for this country. I have said this in some forum, I don't know what, I think on YouTube, where I say, if you look at countries that are with civil strife, those that are difficult to manage, to end the civil strife, like Central African Republic, there is no central authority to which the militia are answerable. You get it? So that young men form gangs and they become militia and they are answerable to nobody, for rent-seeking, for terrorizing anybody, and for their own agenda. If they believe, for example, in this country that Raila is not doing the right thing, that this government has misbehaved, you remember immediately after Raila announced that, is it Raila or NASA, whatever, they are one and the same, about the boycott, and then Safaricom was on the list. What were the boys in Kisumu saying? Allow us to approve these masts. You remember the Safaricom masts and so that kind of violence in the people. It is there now. It is swelling and it is bad for this country. It is only manageable when there's a leader they listen to and they are answerable to, and he can cool them.
Are you saying that if he does not proceed with the swearing in, then he will lose that following?
I wouldn't. It wouldn't bother me if he lost the
no, following. But I'm saying, is that what you think would precipitate?
Yeah, if some, it has happened in history where you get some radical part of the leadership. Sometimes the lower levels of leadership, then their thinking resonates with the masses and they take over and they are reckless. They don't have a reputation like Raila. You get it? They don't have a standing like Raila's, and therefore, if they are the Migunas and the Magayas and the rest of these radical fellows who young men listen to, and this country can get into problems.
What do you think?
I don't agree entirely with I don't actually agree at all with what Professor is saying, because his hypothesis is wrong on the first count as follows. First and foremost, NASA supporters listen to Raila, and the NASA leadership are not the other way around. It is extremely preposterous for Professor to want to purport that it is the NASA fellowship that is pushing Raila Odinga in that direction and not the other way around. And this is a quest for power. The person who offered himself for the candidature of the presidency of the Republic of Kenya was Raila Odinga. And we have said many times without number that, if Raila Odinga said today, we have called off this thing, it is no longer going to be possible for us to go to the canon that we promised you, then that matter ends there. This is what the Right Honorable Prime Minister needs to do. He needs to look at people like Herman Manyora in the face and tell them that for far too long, you have misadvised me on this particular issue. We cannot continue, you know, we cannot continue.
Choke on my
Yes.
water, eh?
we cannot continue to give hoping, to keep giving hope to our masses that, you know, that there is a government that we are going to establish under this constitutional dispensation other than the government that has been established under the same constitution, and we know it. So this is the thing. Electoral process is going to produce those who win and those who lose. But in the long run, it is the country that has won. It is the constitution that has won. So what we must do is this. Each country has issues, and Kenya is no exception, all right? We cannot probably resolve all these issues within a single bullet discussion that comes after every election. You see, that is why it is wrong. So if we want to resolve these issues from the opposition, there is a contribution we can make. The Constitution gives that contribution. It doesn't include throwing tantrums as the opposition. It doesn't include using blackmail of the sort of violence that Professor is talking about. It behoves every opposition leader to act with maturity and reasonableness and call on their troops and tell them there is a civil established method of dispute resolution where there is a problem. And so what is this that we really want to bring across as a contribution of the opposition? Let them say that which they want discussed, and let us discuss this methodically, systematically, not jump at every issue every day, you know, keep telling the nation that we're going to make this announcement after this announcement, and so on and so forth. What I read from what the opposition is doing is simple. A leadership which is lost itself, which has to adopt a wait-and-see attitude and keep moving from day to day as events unfold. I want to see a NASA leadership that gives a very clearly thought process. You know, as Professor said, it is too late for anyone to just jump out and say now, you know, we have postponed the swearing in because of this and the other. It means that this is a process that had not been well thought out. So let us not put this country in a Samsonian moment in which, because I have failed to gain power, then let the house come down, you know. Let us bring the house down for whatever it is worth.
Okay.
It behoves the NASA leadership to give proper and accurate leadership based in the Constitution to its supporters, and it also calls on every NASA supporter to listen to or to hearken to that reasonable voice coming from their leaders. They don't have to go throw themselves into the lake or the ocean just because the NASA leadership is saying so.
Well, let's move on to the position that the president now finds himself in. And yesterday we heard him say pretty much that dialogue should be left now, political dialogue and politicking should be left for 2022 with the Deputy President, William Ruto, who intends to run for presidency then. What does that mean to you? Does that mean he's checked out of the need for talks or national dialogue, or is this the only way to stop the country from this, you know, loop of politics and focus us on something else?
I suspect that the president, of course, one, he was speaking to his supporters, and likely that that might have been what the audience would have loved to hear, and so he spoke to them in that manner, so that they hear him in that manner. I think that he is thinking in a way that he knows clearly that politics in Kenya is just about everything. There's no time that this country stops and begin to say, if that were the case, then 2022 may be difficult for Ruto himself, because Ruto must continue to prepare for 2022, and that's a political process. And so even the process of developing the country is a political process. And so I hope that that was just a rhetoric for his audience yesterday. But what he said in his inauguration and during his acceptance speech when he was elected on the 26th is what he means, that he will actually begin to engage and to discuss and to talk with his opponents on how to lead and to govern this country, and on how to bring everybody on the table. So I do not sincerely believe that that was statement for Kenya. It was more of these things when you're talking to your supporters, and you must know that that side, I've heard that if you say anything and do not mention Raila, it doesn't excite passions as it were. I think he's the president of Kenya. He is bigger, and I know that he will be willing to resolve the issues that are at hand. And really, it's on his table. It's on his table. I do not think that he will be willing to go down as a president who let this country down, because politicians are competing for power, are competing for space, and they can do anything. But for the president, he's the president of this country. He has assumed power, and I presume that he will do what is right for Kenya.
But in terms of dealing with the question of what to do with NASA, what to do with Raila Odinga, how to engage politically, can he, Haman, kick this can down the road and say electoral reform is for the next election, which is 22?
Of course, everybody is adopting hardline thinking, and it could be part of it, in the grandstanding, and you are being pushed by people. But don't allow me, because when you are a teacher for many years like me, you like teaching people, wherever you are, like Abdul Badida said. So I want to teach this young man a bit. James, imagine this situation. If the Supreme Court had nullified yet again the elections of 26th of October, and then President Uhuru Kenyatta said, gentlemen, Kenyans have had enough of this. My victory of August 8th was stolen by the High Court, whatever it is he will use. And now again, I've had enough of this. I'm taking my family for holiday. Kenyans, you can sort yourself out in the next election. What I'm saying is, his followers will go amok, and this country will not have been peaceful. That's what I'm trying to say about Raila. If Raila says today, I've been pushed, I've had enough of this, let me go away, this country cannot be in peace. That's what I'm talking about. Now, to answer your question, I think it is true that, which is really obvious, and even a kid knows, we are not doing well as a country. Those who want to imagine we are doing well, we are not doing well. As a person who is my age, I know I have seen countries burn. They have burned for lesser problems than the ones we are in. Okay? It is also equally true that much as this is a big problem, it can be sorted out in a simple way if people put Kenya first, and that is Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, and sit down to resolve the issues. I know on both sides there are difficult things even to contemplate. For example, Raila will have to accept Uhuru is the president. For any meaningful dialogue to take place, he has to recognize that, because he has been sworn in. That you can't change. So for Raila, he must accept that. For Uhuru, he must also entertain the idea and the fact that once you sit down to talk, anything other than his presence for the time being can be put on the table, including whether or not to have an election before 2022, when it should happen, under what kind of conditions, and so on and so forth. Yes. So it's difficult for both sides. But again, it is simple if you put country first. Like he said, whenever people have gone to war, they have refused to talk. But no war has ever ended in the history of mankind without the same people sitting down to talk, except over graves of their people. So the sensible thing to do in the 21st century is, like he says, to avoid which is so obvious to anybody. If you use your naked eyes, you can see it is obvious. We are not doing well. Anything small happening in this country. You see the problem, Anne, when you allow yourself to be in the situation we are in, and as history will show you, big things never led to problems, revolutions and everything. It is the prevailing conditions that then invite a small little thing. I give this example of Tunisia. When a boy got annoyed, he was slapped by a woman, a city kanjo was carried in Tunisia, and he poured paraffin or whatever, petrol on his body, and he set himself on fire. And Tunisia almost burnt down. That wasn't, the conditions are ripe for problems in this country. And anybody who calls themselves a leader, must not listen to people who tell them otherwise. They must know we are in a situation, a very bad example, but let me use it. Because I've seen people throwing things at Raila Odinga. You saw there was a crack on the windshield of the... Supposing you, in that melee, in some riot and demonstration, whatever you are calling it, Raila dies. Do you think this country will be the same? There are people who think Raila can die today, and then after a week, they say Jaluos were tupa tupa mawe after a week. It's not like that. It can be the end of Kenya as you know it, which is not something you want to wish for your country.
Right.
Unless you don't love it the way I love my country.
And that brings me to my concluding question, and it's to you, Dr. Makanda. You know, over the last few months of covering this election and dealing with these elections, I should say, plural, and dealing with their outcome, one does get the sense that the country, forget the political class, that we, the everyday people, are kind of traumatized by what has happened. You know, there's a real trauma for families who have lost loved ones. There's trauma for those who've lost livelihoods, and for everyday Kenyans who have been treated to this confusion and violence, on their screens, dealing with their neighbors, etc. There's a feeling that the country is traumatized and they want the trauma to stop. And that does not mean not dealing with hard issues. It just means that people want the pain to stop. And when we hear statements like this today, which also again seems to still put us in suspense as to what the next days hold for our republic. I mean, what do you say to a country that really is not moving on in whichever direction one may believe is the right direction, but is simply not moving on and is still carrying this pain of the elections?
Really, for me, I would rather deal with the suspense of today than the suspense that was there, not knowing what to anticipate on Tuesday, on the 12th, swearing. So what after that? Or how is it taken? Because lawyers have already said it would be, it's high treason, and others have said it will not be. So for me, the suspense of living and knowing in the next 48 hours something is going to happen in Kenya that might destroy this country is worse off than the suspense of knowing that they are retreating to allow space for us to discuss, to talk, and to find solutions. Nevertheless, it's true, Kenyans are traumatized in different ways. The civilians, particularly from the sides that support the opposition during this electoral process, they have endured violence, that has been meted on them by the security forces, and that in itself, it's trauma. It's painful. I do hope that there's going to be a way of retribution, a way in which their tears are wiped off, and they're told sorry about what has happened. We can forgive each other and move forward. The police themselves are traumatized. I think police have seen things that are terrible. They now know that actually they can be pushed to massacre Kenyans, because when the president was coming back, not when the president, when Raila was returning, you can actually appreciate that Kenyans are radicalized. And what does a policeman do with a young man coming, whether with a panga, a rungo, a stone, and a policeman is carrying a gun? So the police themselves are also traumatized. They're actually scared. In fact, for me, this day is a good day for the police. They can breathe with a sigh of relief, saying at least on Tuesday we will not be sent out to kill people or to maim people. So they're also traumatized. They need healing. But to a larger extent, I think our politicians need healing. I think we are going through this process because our politicians are under either severe trauma, or they themselves have not retreated to actually reflect on the greater good and ask what is the greater good, because it behoves the leaders. Those in government, they are the big brothers. They must retreat and begin to say, let's raise the standards of our country. Let's hold this country and bring it to a place whereby Kenyans love their country, appreciate each other, and are willing to live together. If they do not do that, then the other side will carry forward their trauma. The effect of their trauma, they have been talking about secession. And secession is actually it's coming out of trauma. It's the highest, it's the epic of a traumatized society out of divisions. And one will pray that the leadership will begin to say, no, let's begin to talk. Let's call these leaders together. If it were possible, let's have a national conference to dialogue over our issues. And as the president moves on to form his government, then begins to say, what is it that I can do to make those who feel excluded from government, so that then I bring them to include them. What is it that can be done to the opposition, so the opposition begins to feel they have a say in how things are run in this country, not to be told, wait until 2022, because it's not possible. They will not wait. But if you give them the opportunity to be able to contribute towards the building of this country, for instance, the proposal that we have done, we have made, create the position of official leader of the opposition, give them a shadow cabinet, create a formal structure through which they can engage in a civil way. But if you say wait until 2022, they make things difficult for this country, and so we do not move forward. And so let's think about how to heal Kenya. Thank you.
I thank you all for your views. That's our time. We're taking a short break. We're back with your views after this.